Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. It really helps a lot. And hey, let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Now, it was a cool, crisp autumn afternoon in our little town of Maplewood. The air smelled like fallen leaves and something good cooking. My mom, Emily Turner, was busy in the kitchen, and the smell of her homemade soup filled the whole house. Felt cozy, like a warm hug. But today wasn't just a regular day, it was special. It was her 45th wedding anniversary with my dad. I knew this day was always a bit hard for her. For a long time, she didn't really celebrate it, maybe because it brought up a lot of feelings. But this year, I wanted to do something different. I had worked 2 part-time jobs, stayed up late, skipped fun stuff with friends all to save up for one perfect surprise. I bought her a pearl necklace. Not just any necklace, though. It was a delicate, vintage one she'd quietly admired for years but never bought for herself. I walked into the kitchen, heart racing, holding the little gift box like it was made of gold. Mom, close your eyes, I said, trying to hide my excitement. She turned around from the stove, her hands still dusty with flour, and gave me a tired but sweet smile. "What's this, honey?" she asked. "Just trust me," I told her. When she opened her eyes and saw the necklace, she didn't say anything at first. Her mouth opened just a little, and I saw her eyes sparkle as she held the box. She let out the softest gasp, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. And in that quiet moment, I knew it had all been worth it. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family, and let me know where you're watching from. Might love to hear. So, it happened on a cool fall afternoon in Maplewood. The leaves outside were turning red and gold, and the air felt crisp. Inside our cozy house, Mom Millie Turner was in the kitchen, making soup. The smell was warm and comforting, just like her. But this wasn't just any ordinary day. It was her 45th wedding anniversary with Dad. I knew she didn't usually make a big deal out of it. Maybe because the memories weren't always happy. But I wanted to change that this year. I had worked 2 part-time jobs, stayed up late for months, and saved every penny I could just for this one moment. I bought her something special, a vintage pearl necklace. It was something she had quietly admired for years but never bought for herself. I walked into the kitchen, my heart racing, holding the little gift box like it was made of gold. "Mom, close your eyes," I said, smiling. She turned around, her hands still covered in flour, and gave me this gentle, surprised smile. "What's this, honey?" she asked. "Just trust me," I said. When she opened her eyes and saw the necklace, her whole face lit up. Her mouth opened just a little, and she gasped soft and quiet, like she was afraid to breathe. "Grace," she whispered, her voice shaky, "I can't believe you remembered. I never thought I'd ever have something like this." She looked like she was holding joy in her hands. But just as she was about to say more, a harsh voice cut through the moment. "What's all this?" Dad's voice came from the living room, sharp and annoyed. My stomach dropped. I didn't need to look to know the expression on his face, tight, cold, and angry. He walked into the kitchen, glanced at the necklace, then at Mom. His eyes narrowed. "You spent money on this," he snapped. "Another useless piece of jewelry, really." It felt like the warmth had drained out of the room. The kitchen, just seconds ago full of love, now felt like it was freezing. Mom's hands started shaking, a little as she held the necklace close to her chest. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come. Instead of standing up for herself, she just said softly, "It's fine, Paul. It's not that important." But I couldn't keep quiet. "Dad, it's for Mom. She's wanted this for so long." And I thought, "Don't tell me what you thought." "Grace," he snapped, his voice rising. "This house is falling apart. You think jewelry is more important than paying the bills." My face burned with anger. I looked at Mom, hoping she'd say something, anything, but she just stared at the floor, like she wanted to disappear. My little brother Ben walked in, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "Seriously, Mom, a necklace, when Dad's been working nonstop to keep things going." No one said anything after that. The silence was so heavy it hurt. Mom stood there holding the necklace like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her fingers were white from gripping it so tightly. Then she whispered, almost like she didn't want anyone to hear, "I didn't ask for this." Dad's face got darker. I saw something in him I hadn't noticed before. He looked like he had to control everything, like the house and all of us belonged to him. Then, without warning, He reached out and snatched the necklace from her hands. I don't want to see this thing again, he growled. It's not staying in this house. Dad, it's her anniversary, I shouted, but it was too late. He was already storming off. The door slammed behind him, and the sound echoed through the house. I turned to Mom. I didn't know what to say. The happiness she'd felt just a few minutes ago was gone. Her face looked blank, tired, like this kind of thing happened more than I ever realized. I'm sorry, Mom, I whispered. I just wanted to do something nice for you. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something new in her eyes. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was a kind of quiet understanding. She gently placed the necklace back in its box and said, almost in a whisper, "It's okay, Grace. I've spent years trying to make things work here. Maybe it's time I stopped trying." The days after that felt quiet, like the calm after a storm, but not in a good way. It was like we were all just pretending everything was normal again. Mom still did everything, folded the laundry, cooked the meals, kept the house in order. But something about her had changed. She wasn't angry, she wasn't even sad, she just looked tired, not the kind of tired that goes away after a nap. This was deeper, like something inside her had given up. One afternoon, about a week later, I came home from school and found her sitting in the living room. She had a cup of tea in her hands, and the room was unusually quiet. She didn't even look up when I walked in. "Mom," I said softly. She finally looked at me and said, "Grace, I want to show you something." I sat down next to her, and she opened a drawer and pulled out a small, worn photo album. The pages were old, the edges curling. She opened it and showed me a photo of herself when she was young, her hair neatly tied back, standing in front of a piano with a soft smile on her face. "That was me," she said. "I used to teach piano. I was good, Grace. People respected me. They appreciated what I did." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the sadness underneath. She turned the page, and there were more photos, pictures of her with students, writing in notebooks, laughing. She looked free, happy. She stopped on one picture of her holding a certificate. "This was for an essay I wrote," she said, tapping the photo gently. This is who I used to be, and then I married your father, and everything changed." I didn't know what to say. I had never heard her talk like this. I looked at the photo of her standing by the piano again. She looked so alive, so full of hope. A part of her I never got to know. I didn't even realize it at first, but the person sitting in front of me wasn't the mom I used to know. I wanted her to be that woman again. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about all this?" I asked softly. She gently closed the photo album and rested her hand on the cover for a moment, like she wasn't ready to let it go. "I thought it was just a rough patch," she said quietly. "I really believed I could deal with it. But over time, I forgot who I was. I started thinking I didn't deserve to want anything for myself." I felt a tight lump forming in my throat. Sadness and anger twisted up inside me. I wanted to shout, to tell her she mattered so much more than the small life she'd been stuck in. I wanted to tell her it wasn't too late, but I didn't know how to say it in a way she'd believe. "I've given up so much of myself, Grace," she whispered. "For years, I kept hoping things would change. That your father would finally see me, really see me on, realize I was capable of more. But instead, he just kept pushing me down, and now, I don't even know if I can find that part of me again." She stood up slowly and walked over to the window. Outside, golden leaves danced in the wind, but she didn't even seem to notice. "I used to think if I stayed long enough, if I just kept quiet and tried to be the perfect wife, maybe one day he'd love me the way I deserved," she said. "But now, I get it. It was never really about love. It was about control." I sat there, stunned. My mother, the strong, creative woman who had always put everyone else before herself, was finally speaking the truth I had never fully understood. "I think I'm done, Grace," she said. Her voice was steadier now. "I've been pretending for too long, pretending everything was okay when it wasn't, pretending he would change, but he didn't, and I'm tired." My heart started pounding. A rush of fear and hope swept over me. "What do you mean? What are you going to do?" She turned and looked at me. Her eyes were calm, but full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, determination. "I'm leaving him, Grace," she said. "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to stay in this house, in this life, and pretend I'm happy when I'm not." And just like that, I couldn't breathe. For years, I had wanted her to choose herself, and now she finally had. I had spent years watching my mom quietly put up with everything, always hoping one day she'd stand up for herself, but I never imagined it would actually come to this. Are you sure, Mom? I asked gently. She nodded, her hands shaking. A little. I'm sure, she said. I've spent too many years blaming myself, thinking I wasn't enough. But it was never really about me, Grace. It was always about him. And I'm done letting him run my life. The days after that felt long and heavy, like we were carrying something big and invisible that made it hard to breathe. Mom didn't talk much after she made her decision. There were no big fights or emotional speeches, just this quiet strength in her that filled the silence more than any words could. I kept watching her, wondering if she'd change her mind. Maybe it was just a moment of courage that would pass. But it didn't. 3 days later, she started packing. She moved slowly, like each step took all her strength. I watched as she folded a few clothes and placed them carefully into a suitcase, clothes that were hers, but never really felt like they belonged to her. Every little thing she packed felt like she was taking back a piece of herself. I couldn't watch anymore. My throat felt tight, like I might cry if I stayed, so I stepped out of the house for a while to give her space. When I came back, the old leather suitcase was sitting on the kitchen counter. It was worn and scratched, like it had lived through a lot, but it was strong, just like her. Next to it was a small red storage box, the same one she had kept hidden for years. Mom, I called, stepping into the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, her fingers gently running along the edges of the red box. Her face looked tired, but there was something new in her expression, like a spark had been lit inside her. I'm ready, she said softly without looking at me. Her voice was calm, but sure. It's time. My heart ached. I had always seen my mom as the one who held everything together, the one who cooked, cleaned, and made sure everyone else was okay. But right then, I saw her differently. She wasn't just the mom who ran the house. She was a woman who had been quietly fighting for her freedom for years. You don't have to do this alone, I whispered, stepping closer. She looked up at me. Her eyes were tired, but firm. I've never really been alone, Grace, she said. I've had you. But I've been waiting for him to change, hoping he'd finally see me, but he never will. So now, I'm going to change things for myself. We gathered up the last of her things and packed the car. She clutched the red box tightly to her chest. I could tell it wasn't just a box of keepsakes, it was a piece of her. A reminder of all the little parts of herself she had managed to hold on to over the years. Before we left, she paused at the front door. She looked back at the house, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name at first. But then I realized it wasn't sadness. It was peace. I thought I couldn't live without this place, she said quietly. But now I know. It wasn't the house I was afraid to leave. It was the life I had inside it, the person I was here. And just like that, she turned away and walked toward something new, finally free. I thought I'd be more scared, but as we both stepped outside and closed the door behind us, it felt like we were finally doing the right thing. Snow had started falling again, covering the streets in a soft, white blanket. Everything looked quiet and calm, like the world itself was starting fresh just like us. As we drove away, I glanced over at Mom. For the first time in a long time, she looked peaceful. There was a kind of calm in her face, like she had finally let go of something that had been weighing her down for years. And in that moment, I didn't just see her as my mother. I saw her as a strong, brave woman who was finally choosing herself. We didn't have a big plan when we left. No map, no step-by-step plan. Just two people, a car full of essentials, and the determination to leave our old life behind. In the back seat were some clothes, a few books, the small red box she'd always kept hidden on, a tiny kitten we had rescued from the cold. Mom had taken the kitten with her, even though Dad didn't want it. That simple act felt bold, like she was saying, I make my own choices now. The drive was mostly quiet. Mom kept her hands tightly on the wheel, focused and a little unsure. I knew she was nervous, we both were, but underneath that nervousness was relief. The constant tension that had lived in our old house was finally gone, and even though we didn't know what was coming next, anything felt better than going back. We arrived at a small apartment complex near the lake. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. The air felt different, here fresh and clean. I could hear the soft sound of the lake water, and the sun shining off the surface gave everything a quiet, golden glow. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, a little kitchen, and a cozy living room. The walls were plain, and the furniture didn't match, but it felt warm in a way our old house never did. As we unpacked the car, I could feel the weight starting to lift from both of us. Mom moved differently, now lighter, more alive. When she looked around the apartment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the feeling of being free after so long. "This is it, Grace," she said softly, glancing around. "This is all I need." I smiled, even though my throat felt tight. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I believed we could figure it out together. That night, we went out for dinner at a small diner nearby. It wasn't anything fancy, just warm soup, fresh salad, and the quiet comfort of each other's company. We ate in silence, but not the sad kind, more like the peaceful kind, where everything that needed to be said was understood without words. When we got back to the apartment, Mom paused at the door. She held the keys in her hand, then turned to me with a soft smile. A real one, the kind I hadn't seen in years. "You know, Grace," she said, her voice low, "I never thought I'd get the chance to live on my own. But now that I am, I think I might finally figure out who I really am." I stood there with her, the wind whispering through the trees, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was watching her break down. I felt like I was watching her come back to life. The first few weeks in the apartment were a blur. We were settling in, slowly finding our own rhythm. It was strange at first, no yelling, no tiptoeing around, no walking on eggshells, just quiet, peaceful quiet. In the mornings, Mom sat by the window with the kitten curled in her lap. She gently ran her fingers through its soft fur, nursing it back to health. I watched her during those moments, not sure how to explain what I was feeling. It wasn't just that Dad was gone, it was that Mom was breathing differently, standing straighter. Even the little things, like holding the kitten, seemed to mean something now. In the evenings, we took walks by the lake. The air was cool, the leaves crunched under our feet, and we walked side by side without needing to say much. Mom would stop to watch ducks gliding by or tilt her head to catch the sound of the breeze in the trees. It was like she was really seeing the world again, listening to it. She hadn't done that in years. One afternoon, about a month after we moved in, I found her sitting on the couch holding an old, worn notebook. I hadn't seen it before. "This was my journal," she said softly, her fingers gently tracing the pages. "I used to write in it every day, back when I still believed I could do something with my life." I sat down next to her, and she handed me the journal. It was full of her handwriting dreams, ideas, hopes she'd once had. She'd written about wanting to teach piano, to travel, to write, all things that had been pushed aside, buried under years of trying to survive. "I don't even know why I kept this," she said, her voice shaky. "I guess I just never had the courage to chase any of it. I thought I was supposed to be content, that being a wife and a mother was all there was." I flipped through a few pages and read them out loud. Her words were full of life, full of longing. "Mom," I said, my voice thick, "you're not just the woman who made dinner and kept the house clean. You've always been more than that. You still are." She smiled, a little sadly. "I hope so, Grace. I just don't know how to start." That evening, we sat together in the living room while the kitten slept beside us. We talked about her dreams, teaching piano again, maybe writing, maybe even traveling one day. She opened up, little by little, and I could see her coming back to herself. The next day, she did something I hadn't seen her do in years. She pulled out her old sheet music and started to play. The notes were a little off, her fingers a bit rusty, but the sound filled the apartment like sunlight. It wasn't just music, it was her, a part of her that had been locked away for far too long. I sat quietly by the door and watched, and I realized something important. My mom wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. Sometimes, I'd catch Mom just staring out the window. Her eyes would drift off like she was somewhere else, and I knew she was thinking about everything she had been through, the pain, the years of being ignored, and the life she had tried to build in a house that never truly felt like hers. One evening, while I was cooking dinner, she quietly sat down at the kitchen table. She held a letter in her hand. It was from her lawyer. The words on the page were short and simple, but the meaning behind them wasn't. "I think it's time, Grace," she said, her voice calm but soft. "I've been putting this off for months, hoping things would change, hoping maybe Paul would finally notice me. But he hasn't, and I can't keep waiting. I think it's time I move forward with the divorce." I turned slowly from the stove, my hands still frozen mid-stir, and looked at her hurriedly, looked at her for the first time. I could see it in her eyes this time. She really meant it. She wasn't unsure. She wasn't second-guessing. I gently asked, "Are you sure, Mom? Do you really want to go through with this?" She nodded, calm and firm. "I've been through this too many times, Grace." The silence, the way he controlled everything, the way he made me feel like I didn't matter. I kept telling myself things would get better, but they didn't. They never did. "I can't wait for him to change anymore." Her voice trembled a little with pain, but there was something else too, something new, a kind of strength, like she had finally stepped out of a long, dark tunnel and was seeing the light. "I'm proud of you, Mom," I said softly, moving closer to her. "I know this isn't easy, but you're doing the right thing. You're finally taking your life back." She gave me a small smile, her eyes filled with both sadness and courage. "It's not easy, Grace, but it's time. I've spent so many years trying to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. Now, I need to start living for me." I didn't know how to respond. I'd always admired how she held everything together. But right then, I realized how much she had given up along the way, how much of herself she'd lost, just trying to keep the family whole. The next morning, after breakfast, we packed a few bags and drove to the courthouse. The building felt cold and quiet. As we walked down the long, gray halls, the reality of it all started to settle in. This wasn't just about filing paper, it was the beginning of a brand new chapter for both of us. Mom filled out the forms with a steady hand. She wasn't doing this for anyone else now. This time, she was doing it for herself. "I never thought I'd be here," she whispered, almost to herself. "I really thought I'd be stuck in that house forever, but I'm not." I sat next to her in the small waiting room, my stomach tight with nerves. I had wanted this freedom for her for so long, but watching it actually happen made me feel the full weight of everything she'd been through. When we finally stepped out of the building, the sun had already gone down. The streets were quiet, but it wasn't a sad kind of quiet. It felt peaceful, like the storm had passed. I looked at her and noticed something different. She stood straighter, and her smile, though small, was real. "I'm proud of you, Mom," I said again, my voice shaking a little. "You did it. You're finally free." She looked at me, and for the first time in years, she didn't look like someone who had been trapped in a life of silence and sadness. She looked like herself again. "I'm not free yet, Grace," she said gently, "but I'm on my way." A few weeks later, things started to change. It was scary, but also exciting. Mom was different, now stronger, more sure of herself. She wasn't the quiet, careful woman who tiptoed around my dad. She was becoming the woman I always believed was inside her. The woman I had waited so long to see. The day after the divorce papers were finalized, she went back to her old piano studio for the first time in years. I didn't go with her. She needed that moment for herself. But I waited at home, hoping she'd come back with something more than just memories. When she walked through the door that afternoon, her face was glowing. She looked lighter, like a burden had finally been lifted. I almost didn't notice the change. It was so gentle, so quiet, but it was there, in the way she stood, in the way she smiled, in the way her eyes shone with purpose. "I did it," she said, her voice full of quiet pride. "I'm teaching again, Grace. I've started giving piano lessons at the community center. They've given me space." My face lit up. "Mom, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." She sat down next to me on the couch, still smiling. "I didn't think I could do it again. I thought I wasn't good enough, that I had nothing left to give. But I do. I can still teach. And maybe I can help people find themselves through music just like I'm finding myself again." I just sat there, watching her in awe. This was the woman I always knew was in there, the woman who had been hiding for far too long. And now, she was finally stepping into the light. I always knew my mom had something special inside her. She was the kind of person who could create, inspire, and even heal others and herself. But I had never seen her so alive, like she had finally woken up after a long, painful sleep. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind. Mom started promoting her piano lessons. She made short videos of herself playing and shared little stories about her past, about the life she had once left behind. It didn't take long for people to notice. Old friends, neighbors, and even strangers started reaching out. As more people showed interest, her confidence kept growing. One afternoon, she surprised me. She had signed up for a local community event, a small gathering where people shared their stories through music. It was her chance not just to play, but to speak up and let others hear her voice again. The night before the event, she sat on her bed, gently packing her music sheets. Her hands were shaking a little. "I don't know if I can do this, Grace," she whispered. "What if they just see me as some old woman playing the piano?" I sat beside her and held her hands. "Mom, you're not just some old woman. You're someone who's survived things most people can't imagine. You're doing this for Unit, for them." She looked at me, still unsure, but I saw the tiny spark of strength in her eyes. "You're right," she said softly. "I'm doing this for me." The event was held in a small, cozy theater on Main Street, the kind with folding chairs and a low stage at the front. When Mom stepped up to the piano, she paused for a second. But then, her fingers touched the keys and, just like that, the room melted away. The music wrapped around us, soft and beautiful, just like when she used to play back when everything still felt okay. I sat in the crowd, my chest tight with emotion. She wasn't just playing a song, she was reclaiming a part of herself that had been hidden for so long. And this time, she was doing it for herself. When the last note faded, the room went completely still. Then slowly, the clapping began, gentle at first, then louder and warmer, until the entire space was filled with applause. Mom kept her eyes closed, her hands still resting on the keys, a soft smile on her face. This was her moment, her freedom. A few months passed after that performance, and I noticed something changing in her every week. She started standing taller. She laughed more. She spoke with certainty. All those years of keeping quiet, of holding everything in just to keep the peace, were starting to fade away. But even as she moved forward, a part of our old life still followed behind, like a shadow. The past doesn't just disappear completely. One evening, just as we were about to eat dinner, the phone rang. Mom glanced at the screen and froze for a moment. I saw the name flash across her face. "Paul." She took a deep breath and answered. "Hello?" Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was bracing herself. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I didn't need to. I could see it all in her face, the tight grip on the phone, the way her mouth pressed into a firm line. Then she spoke, steady and clear. "I'm not coming back. Paul, you need to understand that. You can't keep trying to control me, and you can't pull me back into your mess. I'm done." There was a pause, and then, quieter, she added, "You had your chance, but you didn't want to change." I don't know what he said after that, but I didn't have to. I saw it in her, the way her shoulders pulled back, how she lifted her chin. She wasn't scared, she wasn't angry, she was done. She hung up and set the phone down, her hands still trembling a little. "I'm done, Grace," she whispered. "I let him control me for far too long. I'm not doing it anymore." I got up and wrapped my arms around her, not just to comfort her, but to stand with her, to remind her she wasn't alone anymore. We were in this together now. For the first time, it felt like we were truly free. And the next day, everything started to feel brand new. I saw something that completely surprised me. Mom walked out of our apartment with a confidence I hadn't seen in a long time. She wasn't the same woman who moved in months ago, nervous and unsure of herself. This time, she looked strong, steady, and ready to take charge of her life. She wasn't just getting through the day anymore, she was finally living it. The very next morning, she called a lawyer and started the process of cutting all ties with Paul. But unlike before, she wasn't doing it for me or anyone else, she was doing it for herself. This divorce wasn't just paperwork, it was her way of letting go of everything that had held her back. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about Mom waking up, taking her power back, and rebuilding the life she had once sacrificed just to keep others happy. Not long after that, we got a package in the mail. It was from Paul. Inside was just a letter, but the words in it felt like a punch to the gut. "I'm not giving up on you, Emily. You can't just throw everything away. We're family. You belong here with me." As I read those lines, my chest tightened. It wasn't the message itself that hurt, it was how Paul still believed he had control over her, even now. I handed the letter to Mom. She read it once, calmly, and then quietly said, "I'm done." Her voice was firm but peaceful. "I'm not going back. This is my life now, and I don't need him to live it." Then she tossed the letter into the trash, and just like that, something shifted. The past didn't seem to have power over her anymore. She was finally, truly free. The weeks after that felt strange, but in a good way. There was this quiet calm around us, but it wasn't just because the fights and fear were gone. It was something deeper. Mom was changing, and honestly, So was I. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were actually living. Mom even started teaching piano again. Every time a new student came to our door, it felt like another piece of her was coming back to life. I could see it happening right in front of me. Mom was getting her confidence back. Not just the surface level kind, but the real kind that comes from deep inside. Teaching piano wasn't just about music for her anymore, it was about helping people find something they loved, something that made them feel alive. She was so patient, so full of joy, and so different from the quiet, tired version of her I'd known for years. She wasn't just someone's wife or someone's mom anymore. She was herself again, and she was proud of it. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. Right after dinner, she walked into the living room and handed me a small envelope. "What's this?" I asked, curious. She smiled soft but proud and said, "It's a letter from the community center. They want to feature me in their newsletter." My eyes lit up. "Mom, that's amazing," I said, grinning. "You're really making a difference." She smiled again, a little shyly. I knew she wasn't used to being noticed like this, but something had changed. After years of being ignored and pushed aside, people were finally starting to see who she really was. Someone strong, kind, and incredibly talented. A few months later, something even bigger happened. The community center asked her to host a recital for her students. It wasn't just about the music, it was a chance to show everyone how far she had come. The night of the recital, the little hall was packed. I sat in the front row, watching her as she stepped onto the stage. Her eyes sparkled with nervous excitement. She hadn't performed in years, not since before her life had been taken over by Paul's demands and expectations. But this time, she was doing it for herself. When she sat at the piano, there was a small pause, like she was taking a deep breath. Then her fingers touched the keys, and the music began. It was beautiful. It was bold. Each note told a story, not just of music, but of all the years she had been quiet, all the sacrifices she had made. And yet, the music wasn't sad. It was filled with freedom, with strength. It was like she was pouring her whole heart into every note, saying, "This is me. This is who I am now." When the final note hung in the air and faded, there was a moment of complete stillness. Then the room erupted into applause. Not just polite clapping, but real, thunderous applause. The kind people give when they know they've just seen something special. Mom stood up to bow, and I saw tears in her eyes, not tears of pain, but of release. She had finally let go. Let go of the past, of the fear, of everything that had held her back. She was free. Later that night, as we walked home in the cool night air, she turned to me and said quietly, "I never thought I'd get here, Grace, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." I squeezed her hand and smiled. "You're finally living for yourself, Mom, and it's beautiful." She nodded, her eyes full of lights. "I think I'm finally ready to live on my own terms." And that's when I realized, this whole time, I thought I needed to help her escape. But she didn't need rescuing. She needed to find her own strength. And she did. We both did. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were finally living the lives we chose for ourselves.